Bell is a broadcaster who is here to talk on the business of curiosity, an apt topic to discuss on the radio as curiosity is essential for anyone working in broadcasting. His podcast, Sketchplanations, which he runs with his two friends, Jono and Tom Pellereau, is designed to discuss the big ideas and concepts that make up our everyday lives. Why do we do what we do? What makes certain things work the way they do? Rob enjoys taking complex ideas and helping other people understand them more easily. Topics the team have focused on their podcast have included the Shirky Principle, the Law of Diminishing Returns, Botany, i.e. plant life, and Schadenfreude, pleasure at others' people's misfortunes, which we'll be discussing later and finding out more about what those are. This is the business of curiosity. Welcome to Connections Radio, Rob, and thank you for joining me today. Can you please start by taking me through your career background?
Sure, Wizzi. Yeah, thanks very much for having me on. So I trained or was educated as a mechanical engineer. I have a master's in mechanical engineering. From there, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my career, but I knew what was important to me, and I got myself a job in the environmental sector. So I worked in the environmental sector for 8 years for kind of a government-funded, not-for-profit organization. And I was helping people, everyday people, save energy in the home. So I was a program manager, business development, that kind of thing, working in an office with budgets and reports and all that kind of stuff. And in my spare time, though, I really enjoyed radio. I did a bit of university radio, I did a bit of hospital radio in London, voluntary radio. And I started, I was trained as a media spokesperson for the company, for the environmental company I was working for. So if ever there was a media request for an independent view on what was happening, maybe with an energy price hike in the homes or a cold snap and people were turning up their thermostat, how can we reduce our bills? I would kind of be shipped out to go and do those interviews. And I really enjoyed it. Sometimes I was in someone's home and we did a couple of live stints on Sky News or on the couch with BBC Breakfast, that kind of thing, and the odd radio interview. And I just really, really enjoyed it. And because I was doing some of that in my spare time as well, I thought, you know what? I feel like there could be more to a job than turning up to an office and doing stuff that's okay, and that I'm interested in the subject, but the actual work itself, report writing and managing budgets, wasn't really doing it for me. So I quit the job and decided to try and get into broadcasting. And
Brave.
that's it. Can't brave slash stupid, you
To
know?
quit before you get into something else, I think is a brave leap of faith. But sometimes we need to take that leap of faith, don't we? In
Oh,
order to
absolutely.
focus on the next stage of our lives, I think.
Absolutely. And I distinctly remember that first Monday morning after I'd left my job. And I was sat at home at my desk at home. I was like, right, I got my coffee, had my breakfast, got my coffee, sat down at my desk. Like, oh God, what do I do now?
Amazing. Well, it sounds quite familiar, your journey into broadcasting, volunteering and doing student radio and college radio and stuff like that. Like that's kind of how
Yeah.
I started. I was a volunteer
Yeah.
on community station Kane FM for I think it was 8 or 9 years, and I used to do the breakfast show. So I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning, cycle from Woking to Guildford, do the breakfast shows, and I loved it. But
Yeah.
it was actually during the pandemic that I went pro and got my job on Connections Radio, which we're doing now. So yeah, good for
Amazing.
you. Good for you.
How
So
was that?
why?
How was that getting up for 9 years from the breakfast show? Getting up at that time.
I loved it so much, I didn't mind. And I'm a morning person anyway, so I wake up like a bolt of lightning between 4:30 and 5:30. I'm sort of one of
Oh,
the
great.
5 a.m. AMers. I didn't used to be when I was young. In my teens and 20s, I was a night owl, and I seem to have
Yeah.
trained my body into being a morning lark. So I don't know if that's even possible neuroscientifically, but I seem to have done it. So
But
yeah,
what a
no, I
magical way
loved
to make
it.
use of that energy in the morning to be on a breakfast show,
And
which
also
is
to
such an
cycle
important
there.
part of so many people's day. Yeah, and the cycle there
Because
as well. That's all
I
part of
used to,
that.
the cycling, it was about a 40-minute cycle. A lot of it was uphill. And I used to get to the studio and just be, couldn't wait. And doing it
Absolutely
live was
buzzing.
great. See, since the
Yeah.
pandemic, I learned in the pandemic to run a home studio, and I've been a home studio person since then, but
Yeah.
live radio is just the best thing ever. And I find I'm
It's so
better on
good.
live radio. I think the pressure of getting it right, and it's just,
Yeah.
So anyway, back to you. Why is curiosity important, both in life, but particularly in broadcasting?
Well, in broadcasting, it's important because I typically in what I do. So what I do as a broadcaster generally is present TV documentaries about engineering and history and engineering history. A bit of adventure thrown in there as well. That is what I do.
So do you
And
do
so as
TV or just audio?
TV,
Oh, you do
so I
TV as
do,
well. Fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm primarily a TV presenter.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've done a lot of stuff for Channel 5, for BBC, Discovery, Nat Geo, all that kind of stuff. And typically they are engineering because that's my niche. That's what I do. That's what I love. That's what I'm curious about to go and understand more about. So what the curiosity is kind of key in that role because I am telling the story for the viewers. I am kind of there on their behalf, really. So I want to try and ask the questions that the audience might be asking themselves when they're watching it at home. And sometimes they might seem like really simple questions for an engineer, me, to be asking, let's say, another engineer who's built this bridge and is telling me about it. But you have to always bear in mind what the audience is thinking and kind of keep it as simple as you not as simple as you can because that's you don't want to dumb it down so much that it's just not it's too what am I trying to say here? There's a balance to be found between being overly technical and detailed and dumbing it down too much so that it feels like
Absolutely.
you're not assuming a decent level of intelligence and interest from your audience, which you
And it
have
must
to. That
depend.
is.
It must depend which channel you're on, who the target audience is, the age group, the
Yeah,
sort of cultural background, things like that as well. And I mean, they say, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it yourself. And I
yeah,
wonder if
possibly.
I think that's quite key here. So when it comes to translating technical concepts, you must really know your niche, know your engineering niche back to front in order to then put that into layman's terms. What do you think is the key to translating technical concepts into simple questions that you can present to an audience? What's the top thing you have to do or think about?
So what I've learnt through broadcasting for a while is to be comfortable with making a statement about something without over qualifying it with all these conditions that make it absolutely true. So you
Mm,
might say, this bridge is the tallest bridge in the world. Let's say something like that. There might be some conditions that actually qualify that, like uh, that was built in the last century that is a this type of suspension bridge and that I don't know, has steel cables and whatever it might be. There might be all those qualifying conditions. But if you feel the need for your own, I don't know, for your own peace of mind to list all those conditions, it becomes meaningless from the viewer. You need to go in
mm,
and be able to state confidently that you can back up if someone wants to challenge you on them. You can back it up. But I've found that that is one of the key tools that I've discovered to be comfortable in myself, to be able to broadcast quite complex matters into it in a more simple way so that it's understandable. Again, not underestimating the intelligence of the audience, just making it interesting and that it moves along at pace. Because most engineers will want to tell you all of the details that makes that statement true.
yeah.
And that can become quite long
Is
and
it
can
challenge?
get quite boring.
Sorry, do you get a pushback from the people you're presenting or representing and talking about? Do you have to get your scripts approved by them or are you in charge of it? I guess that's my question. And do
No,
you have
yeah,
any
no,
sort of pushback where they say, no, this bit's essential and you're sort of saying to them, but we need to think of the audience? Is that a challenge?
it can be, but there's a beautiful thing of the edit, which I'm not involved in my TV, but in my TV programs, I'm typically the presenter. And
Hmm.
so I come in and I do my job as the presenter, and then the directors and the production company will take that away and they'll edit it. And I understand that process a lot better than I used to as well. So if you're with an expert who wants to tell me about this bridge, we're going to come back to bridges. I love bridges, by the way, Wizzi.
You do, don't
Um,
you? They're fine,
um,
sturdy things.
if
Hopefully.
if we're with this expert who wants to tell me all these details that I know aren't going to make the cut,
Yeah.
but it makes them happy because they know that they're telling me this and it's important to them. I'm more than happy to listen and ask questions about that as long as the guy whoever's operating the camera isn't too tired and hasn't had it on their shoulder for too long. Um, then I'm very happy for that to happen, knowing that when it gets to the edit, it will get cut down so that it's a nice, snappy story that
Mm,
puts across a decent amount of information, but then moves on to keep the viewer interested. Because the
mm,
worst thing would be that people don't watch the rest of the program. And I'm sure whoever I was interviewing, that contributor, would be much happier that somebody stayed to watch the rest of the program rather than
yeah.
watched half of what they wanted to tell me about this particular bolt and the thread on that bolt,
Yeah.
um, and then turned off halfway through it. So yeah, there's a
Indeed.
balance, and I've learned that. But that's not to say that my curiosity, my own curiosity, doesn't take me down these wormholes. Which typically I love to have those conversations with contributors either before or after we start filming.
Yeah, the off-cam stuff. Do you ever record them for EPKs or anything for your own purposes, electronic press kits and stuff like that? Do you record the off-air conversations, do a little bit of journaling?
I don't, but that is a great idea to have a little audio recorder with me the whole time
Yeah.
to because the people I meet, I get to meet. I love my job so much. I get to meet amazing people who've done astonishing things. Typically, they
Yeah.
don't see themselves as being having done achieved
Humble,
astonishing things.
aren't they? The
Ah,
finest guests I get on this show are always really like reticent to come on the show because they think they don't have anything to contribute. And I'm like, these people are superstars. So I love it when I get a quality guest who agrees to come on. There's a few I'm working on at the moment, and it's been months. And I'm like, come on, book your interview
really?
because they're so expert in their niche and they're
Yeah,
so humble about it, and they think
yeah.
they've got nothing interesting to say. And it's funny, isn't it, in broadcasting?
It is,
Tell
and whenever,
me,
oh yeah,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
No,
I
go
was
on.
going to
What
say
were you going to say?
whenever I leave a conversation with one of those people, whether that's been what we've recorded or what we've recorded plus the off-camera conversations, I always feel so humbled and so grateful to that person who's given up their time and who's spoken to me about this and given me. I always walk away with this amazing feeling of almost like goosebumps and just really comforting. And sometimes my eyes are a little bit watery because I just feel so grateful to this person for what they do and for the time they've just given us. That happens quite a lot, and I have to check myself. Like, are you crying, Robbie? Why are you crying? You're an
Don't be so
idiot.
emotional. This is professional. I
Chill
love
out,
it.
mate.
That's so sweet. Tell me about Sketchplanations, how you came up with the concept and what it's all about.
So, Sketchplanations is an idea and a concept of one of my very, very good friends called Jono, who's a designer and an author, an illustrator. And about 10 years ago, his wife bought him a do a sketch a day book, a sketchbook, a sketch a day. So 365 pages. And he just started doing that. And he's a pretty decent artist as it is, but he just sketched stuff. And this book was with him all the time. And then after a year, he's like, oh, I quite enjoyed doing that. And he found himself sometimes just sketching things that he'd heard about or that he'd read about that he decided, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I could kind of simplify that down into a simple sketch, that concept that I've just read about, maybe in software design or whatever it might be, or psychology that he might have read somewhere. And just, oh, I'll do a little sketch for that. And then he started doing that more regularly. And he's been doing that for 10 years. And now he's got over 900 of these sketchplanations, these
Wow.
hand drawn sketches that explain something that he finds interesting and thinks other people might find interesting as well.
Yeah.
And so between him, John O'Hay, and another very good mutual friend of ours, a chap called Tom Pellereau, who won The Apprentice back in 2011, and he still works with Lord Sugar. He has a business with Lord Sugar.
Mhm.
Him and I have over the years discussed ways that we might be able to do some broadcast projects together. And we thought about podcasts, and we were just talking. We thought, oh, maybe we could do a podcast of sketchplanations. Let's see if Jono's up for it. So we did a pitch to him, and Jono's a very busy lad, but he was up for it. And so Sketchplanations, the podcast, was born, which is slightly odd because these sketches were always visual
Because it's
entities
visual, yeah. So how have you
that explain
translated
something. Well,
the
what we've
medium into
done,
audio only?
we've basically ripped apart all of his work to dissect, to kind of finesse these complex concepts into a simple sketch, and we make it much more complicated again by talking about it and taking it off in all sorts of tangents and applying it to our own lives and seeing if there's anything that we can learn and perhaps give little tips or advice or just examples of where these things have applied to us and I'm now much more conscious about so many things because we've talked about them in Sketchplanations. Stuff that just happened,
Mm.
stuff that you just connections you have with other people, or things you find yourself doing in company, whatever it might be. It just more aware. I just start to notice things a bit more, which is all part of that curiosity.
Yeah, I was going to say
That
that sounds very curious of you.
and it is, and we all enjoy
Yeah,
that, and so we
yeah,
love these
yeah.
discussions. It's great fun. It's
Do
great
you
fun.
think humans naturally are curious beings? Are we
Well,
all a
if you
bit
think about
nosy?
it, right. So, like as a 5-year-old, what is the word most 5-year-olds say all the time? Why?
Why?
Yes. So,
Yeah.
where are we going? We're just going up these stairs. Why? Because we need to go to the shops to buy some milk. Why? Because we
Why?
don't have any milk at home. And that curiosity, I feel, is probably inbuilt within
Yeah.
us at a very young age. But then at some point, it tends to stop. I think for some people, maybe, and that just innocent curiosity of what's happening here and why is that happening this way kind of stops and we just accept it and get on. Maybe it's because we're too busy and we don't have the bandwidth in our brains to ask all these questions. But it's really lovely to stop and notice things that happen and dissect them and talk about them. And why not record it while you're doing it? Because other people might enjoy it as well.
Do you think it's almost a conditioning thing? Because when we're fresh, young things, we're not very conditioned into society. We're not very controlled. We go and scrape our knees and climb trees and things like that. Hopefully, we still do that as kids. I don't know with technology. But do you think we almost need to uncondition some of what we've learned about being less curious? And also, does the media have something to answer for this as well? Because it's a bit easy now to get a bit disenchanted with the state of the world.
Yeah.
The news is quite distressing. I actually find the news quite distressing.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on right now. It's a difficult time. Do you think that shuts people down from their natural curiosity because they don't have the control they perhaps felt they had as a child?
Perhaps. I mean, I think the conditioning you're talking about earlier, is that just about being like polite in society? And if
No, I
somebody,
mean, I mean, as we go through life, we are taught specific ways to behave, feel, think. We're kind of conditioned into a society that we belong to, and that's
but
anywhere in the world. We're
why would that
conditioned.
stop us? Why would that stop us asking why?
That's a good question. um,
And unless it
I
would be
think
deemed rude that,
I
somebody says, "Oh, I've bought. Oh, hey,
well,
look, I bought this car. I'm so proud of this car." Well, why? Why did you buy that one?
I think that's true. I think as children, when you say why, eventually your parents are going to say, "Would you stop saying why? Would you stop asking why?" I
Yeah,
mean, little subtleties like that, being told, stop being nosy. Don't
yeah,
be curious. I wonder if there's almost a message going on as we grow in order to
yeah, maybe.
behave well and do well in society. I wonder if we almost get a subconscious message of we need to stop being so curious. That's what I wonder. Just a subtle subconscious thing is all I mean. I'm being a bit clumsy with my language at the moment, but
Yeah, maybe just to trying to conform to, I don't know, societal norms. But
hmm.
I don't know if you ever meet someone who's curious, if you ever have a conversation, let's say you're, I don't know, an event and you end up speaking to somebody over a canapé and a glass of fizz or whatever, and they're really curious about what you do. You've told them, you've made your introductions, and either curious about what you do, or you've just got back from a trip somewhere, and they're really curious about it, and they ask you lots of questions. Isn't that kind of lovely to be asked loads of questions about that?
I think it is, but I also think some people can find it a bit overwhelming and a bit like you're being put on the spot. Because I know somebody who asks a lot of questions and she goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I've witnessed this in social situations, and people eventually go, "Oh, can we talk about you now?" I feel
Okay,
like I'm in
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
spotlight. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean?
So again, maybe there's a balance there. Like I was talking about earlier
Yeah,
with the
going back
level
to
of
your balance.
detail,
Yeah.
to communicate in broadcasting. Maybe there is a balance in kind of what is an acceptable level of curiosity to have. And I guess it's all
Mm.
dependent on the situation, right? In a social situation with somebody you've just met, yeah, probably is quite important to get on well in life at these
Instead of
situations.
interview them as if you're on the
It's
radio.
yeah, and really pushing them for a Jeremy Paxman. Yes, but why did you go to Tenerife on holiday this summer?
What for? Who was there? What did you do? How was the
Yeah.
hotel? Were the towels fluffy or scratchy? You know, all of these questions. People, I think some people can just be a bit like, "Oh my goodness, do you really want to know all these finite details? Why? Why do you want to know?" You know, that goes back to why, doesn't it? And then you become
So,
curious about why that person's so curious.
and yeah, and around we go, around we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do find so curiosity, I feel, is a it's a lovely characteristic and personality trait perhaps to have. I certainly enjoy my curiosity in how the world works, how we
Mm.
interact with each other as humans. But there probably is a balance there, which in my mind I'm thinking about one of the episodes we did. One of Jono's Sketchplanations was on the law of diminishing returns, which maybe then plays here as well. Maybe the law of diminishing returns applies to levels of curiosity, and maybe it applies in different ways in different situations.
Can you explain what the law of diminishing returns is?
So the law of diminishing returns is where at some point to continue adding something to what you're doing. How am I going to explain this? Uh, at,
Does it
at,
relate to what we were just discussing about about the person being curious? At some point you need to get something back from someone. You can't just talk, you can't just monologue.
well,
So you need a two-way conversation.
yeah, that probably is a way to apply it, but the law of diminishing returns could be applied to most things in life, really. But the law of diminishing returns states that at some point, continuing to add something into a situation or a project will start to, at some point, it will
Stop improving it.
stop improving it, stop bringing as much benefit from it. And
Okay.
so the great example, and what the sketch explains very well,
Yeah.
is the law of diminishing returns through the old adage, too many cooks spoil the broth,
Yeah.
right? So you want to cook this massive vat of broth. It's huge, and you need more than one chef to do it. So one chef isn't enough. So you add two, and the broth gets done a bit better and a bit quicker. You add three, oh, it's getting even better and a bit quicker. Four, five. When you get to seven, eight, nine, 10, suddenly people are standing around not doing anything. I
Or
bet yet
chucking
you're
too much
having to
salt in
pay
the broth.
them. Oh, chucking too. There's too much salt now.
Ruining
So
it. Yeah.
at some point, continuing to add to that situation stops becoming a benefit and can actually then become detrimental.
Can it work with art as well? You know, they say that a piece of art is never finished, only abandoned. Because you never finish a piece of art, a piece of music, but at
Yeah,
some point you have to stop adding and you have to leave it and say it is finished. So could it relate to that as well?
definitely it can, and that it can relate to so many things along the lines of how good is good enough,
Mm.
right? So a piece of work that you're writing and you've been through it three or four times. It's I don't know, a two-page article on something, and you've been through it, you've written it, and you've been through it seven, eight, nine, 10 times. To keep going through it and you keep making little changes there, to keep going through it, at some point you've got to say, do you know what? That's good enough for what it needs to
It
be. The
serves its
same,
purpose. Yeah.
it serves its purpose. The same with art, the same with editing a podcast, for example.
Yeah.
At
It can
some point you
be
say, do
really
you know
tough though,
what?
can't it?
That's good enough.
It can be
That's good
really
enough.
tough to leave it. I know this because with my own work, my own broadcasting work, I used to have a tendency to overproduce
Yep.
and I would cut every single cut from person to person, I would make absolutely 1 second gap or something like that.
Hmm.
And it lost its natural flow. I don't edit
There
them
you
anywhere
go.
near as much as I used to. And they come across better because people actually don't mind a pause, a thinking pause, a thinking there's an and there's a um you want to get rid of the second type of but the you kind of want to keep in because it's a thinking it's that kind of thing. So I think
So that
it's cool.
that
It relates
is
to everything, doesn't it?
the law of diminishing returns in the wild. Yeah, absolutely, Wizzy.
Yeah.
It does relate to anything, and that goes to say that's the same for so many of Jono's sketches and the sketches that we cover in the podcast. We might go into that discussion thinking that in our own minds, right? I know how this applies to me in my work, let's say.
Mhm.
But then you end up talking about all these different examples from your social life, from your family life, from your relationships, from your hobbies, as well as your professional work, which is, I absolutely love it. I mean, I know these guys, I've known these guys for 20 odd years, but I get to know them even better through the
Mm,
podcast. And we all know a lot of what we've done in our lives. But then you get to go in a bit deeper about it. And more often than not, I'll come away having learned something about myself and about my friends. And sometimes with a real kind of conscious desire to maybe do something slightly differently or try and think about something slightly differently.
mm. I want to go back to your career and your broadcasting work. How did you initially break into the industry? And what I mean is professionally, because we all
Hmm.
volunteered. Um, but
Yeah.
when did you get your break on the more prestigious platforms that you broadcast on now?
Yeah, so my first break was with a BBC Two engineering series.
Hmm.
Went out on Sunday evenings. It was called Engineering Giants. It was a three-part series. In each episode, we learned how a big machine worked by having it taken apart and exploring how it was taken apart. And the favorite episode of that, and one of the favorite programs I've ever made in my whole career, was the first one I filmed, and it was on a Boeing 747, a British
Hmm.
Airways Boeing 747, and it was in British Airways maintenance hangar in Cardiff, this huge, great big hangar off the side of Cardiff Airport. And this Boeing 747 came in, it had flown from London, very short journey for a 747 from London to Cardiff,
Mm.
touched down into the hangar, and within minutes, teams of engineers are all over it. And it was in there for 5 weeks, and the engines came off, all the seats came out, all the wiring comes off. I was
Wow.
crawling around inside the fuel tanks, all this kind of stuff, and they do that. Planes need a lot of maintenance, and this is like the big overhaul maintenance that happens every 6 years on these planes. But that was my break into it, and I got that through an audition. But I was going along to these auditions, and I'd done some other little bits prior to that were paid, but for some stuff that there's one thing I did that I'm still really embarrassed about, and my mates that I'm not embarrassed about any of the stuff I've done apart from this one episode of this show called Fit Gear. It was kind of a play on Top Gear, and it was about testing out the latest fitness equipment and products to see whether they're hot or not. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful. It was done in a studio, and it was dreadful. But my friends know there was one of the products we got sent to review was this set of Zumba DVDs,
Hmm.
right? So it dates it slightly. And the only way to review a set of Zumba DVDs, Wizzy, is to do the blooming Zumba DVD.
Do the Zumba. I'm
It was
imagining it
awful.
now. You look great.
It was absolutely awful. And my mates know where this is on YouTube, and I hate it when that comes out. Anything else I don't mind at all. And I'm not embarrassed by much, but that I
Yeah.
absolutely hate. But that's how I got my break. I just went along to auditions, not knowing what I was doing. And when we
Mm.
even went out and started filming this documentary about the Boeing 747, I had no idea what I was doing. And to think back on it now, I mean, to be the director going, who is this guy? Yeah, he seems to have no clue. I mean, I could do what I was asked to do, but there was, I feel like I was very clunky. I
Green.
feel like I was clunky. Yeah, very, very green.
Mm.
But the learning curve is amazing. I'm still learning and I love learning. And
Yeah,
it's
you seem to
lovely
be an
now.
avid learner with your curious nature, and you
That's the
must learn a
curiosity again.
lot doing your podcast. You must learn so much.
We do. We do.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks, roughly, we film. Sorry, every 2 weeks we record.
Hmm.
And as well as learning, I have to say it's also just lovely to spend this time with my friends. An hour and a
Yeah.
half that's scheduled in every couple of weeks, and I'll probably see them a little bit in between that as well. But it's lovely. Kind of the kids have gone to bed, everyone's chilled, and let's
Yeah.
have a lovely chat about stuff.
I used to get my friends, some of my favorite friends, to come and co-host with me when I did the Wake Up Happy Breakfast show on Kane,
Nice.
and that was fun. And we had them on rotation, so it was three of my bloke friends, and sometimes it would be Jack, sometimes it would be Shiny, sometimes it would be James, and once it was all three of them. And my goodness, was that difficult to manage as like the
Carnage.
person who's supposed to be in the control seat. I was like, "Would you shut up? I'm trying to talk." But it was so much fun. We're actually running out of time, so I have one more question for you. It's about asking questions. How important is asking the right questions at the right time to the right person in your work?
Yeah, it's very important. This is something I've learned over the years as well. Typically, going out to film a documentary, you'll go and meet somebody who's got this amazing thing to show you or something that adds to your story. And you'll go and meet them and you go and say hello, and they know what they're here to talk about. The production team have dealt with all that. But it takes a while for the crew to get the cameras out and to do a little recce and see what's going on and figure out how we're going to film it. And part of my job, as I see it, is kind of looking after our contributor, our guest who we've asked to be there. And it's so easy just to get into the conversation that you want to have with them on camera. They're primed for it. They've been prepping for this for days, if not weeks. They just want to tell you what and show you everything that you're there to go and film. What I've
Don't
learned
do
the
it.
most is
Mm.
about just talk about their holidays or what they're into in their spare time. It's a lovely way to get to know them, and hopefully they feel a bit more connected to me when we do start filming on camera, and there's a bit more warmth and empathy between us. But secondly, it means that when they come to tell you what they so primed to tell you on camera, they're not telling it to you for the second time. They're telling it to you fresh.
Yeah, I really echo that because it's the same with my broadcasting work, my broadcast radio work.
Yeah,
Off air, the warm-up chat, I never asked them about their work or career ever
yeah,
because I think I probably did when I was a bit greener. And then
yeah,
when
me
they
too.
tell you something for a second time, they've lost the enthusiasm, they've missed bits out because they think, well, I've already told you this. Even though
Yeah,
they know that that was for camera and that's off air, you
yeah,
can't help yourself if you it's the way we don't do practices. We just jump
no,
in with documentary making and stuff like that, isn't it?
yeah.
Rob Bell, I'm gonna have to leave it there. What have you got coming up, first of all? And then we'll say bye bye.
There's a few shows, there's a few documentaries in the can that are waiting to come out at some point. I did a
Mhm.
lovely documentary on the Panama Canal, which was amazing. There's some others on lighthouses that we did, both the engineering and the history of those. And the podcast comes out every couple of weeks, so you can pick that
Lovely.
up on all podcast players. Sketchplanations, the podcast.
Sketchplanations, the podcast, and that's on everywhere, is it?
Yeah, it's on everywhere. Or
Yeah.
the best place to go to is sketchplanations.com/podcast, and everything's up there.
Fantastic. Well, Rob Bell, thank you for joining me on the business of curiosity. Where else can we follow you online? Do you like LinkedIn? Do you like Instagram? What's your favorite platform of
Instagram. I mean,
choice?
I'm not a massive fan of social media, but Instagram is probably the best place. So you can keep up with what I'm up to in documentary making, in podcasting, in life generally. It's rob.bell on Instagram.
Rob.bell on Instagram. Great. We will see you on Instagram. Thank you for your time today. It's been a really interesting discussion and have a lovely day.
Thanks, Wizzi. You too. Go well.
How was that for you?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Sorry, we're running out of time. I was so busy with that having a lovely time. I didn't realise it was running